Rain had rinsed the city down to metal and glass by the time the bus let me off 2 blocks early. Construction cones, raw asphalt, a man in a hood waving traffic like he was conducting a slow band. I didn't mind the walk. A light bag, 3 shirts, razor, the pills I take whether I trust them or not. The air had that wet cold that gets into your wrists and makes old aches honest. Leo's place sat back from the street. Brick kept tidy, hedges clipped close. A pot of lavender on the porch. Lucy's touch, shivered like gray flame in the drizzle. The porch light was already on, a coin held up to the dark. I saw him before he saw me. My son braced against the post, cigarette low between 2 fingers, shoulders knotted under a jacket that didn't seem to fit. He wasn't smoking so much as borrowing the smoke. His eyes kept tracking the road, flinching when a car hissed by. He lifted his phone, screen dim to a ghost. I heard a whisper smoothed to nothing. "I'll get it. Tomorrow." I said tomorrow. He turned, pasted on the grin he's used since he was 10. "Don't worry, Dad, it's handled," and stepped in for a hug. He smelled of wet wool and paper. His ribs felt sharper than last time. We patted each other's backs out of rhythm, 2 men keeping time to different songs. "You made it," he said. "How could I not?" I set my bag down, offered a hand out of habit. He pulled me in again to prove something to himself or me. I wasn't sure. The door opened and warmth washed out with Lucy. Towels, lemon soap, a quick half hug that looked like blotting a spill. Her eyes were damp in the corners. Wet or not. "Frank," she said, and the name held. "I'm so glad you're here." "Me too," I told her. Apologized for the weather as if I'd brought it with me. Habit. "I started dinner," she said, and breathless. "It'll be perfect." The look she sent Leo wasn't a glance. It was a pressed note. He nodded once, like a man signing a receipt. 2 minutes, he told her, already angling back toward the post. A call. To me, "Go in, Dad. Warm up." He turned his face to the drizzle and not the house. "I'll get it. Give me until tomorrow." The words arrived soft and urgent, a man trying to sand off the edges of a deadline. Inside, the house smelled like rosemary over heat. A radio played low enough to make even the commercials sound kind. I hung my jacket, lined my shoes heel to heel. Order settles me. Lucy handed me a towel warmed on the radiator. Her hands moved quick, precise. Good hands, like a nurse's or a mechanic's. "You're freezing," she said lightly. Then, in the deeper pocket under the lightness, "I'm so glad you're here. He's not himself lately." She kept moving as she said it. Oven open, steam fogging her glasses, table already set like a magazine photo. Cloth napkins, good plates, a short vase with a single white rose and 3 lavender sprigs cut from the pot. She'd put on lipstick too bright for her. The cheerfulness read as work. "I'll see what I can see," I said. "Diagnose first, fix second." Leo came back with his smile worn smooth. "Smells amazing," he said, kissing the air above her hair. To me, "Beer? Water's fine." At the table, we danced around the hole. Hydrangeas, the trash pickup changing again, the new pharmacist who thinks northern wet's romantic. Leo transferred his fork hand to hand, like he couldn't remember his own habits. He kept the phone face down, finger tapping the edge like he could let pressure out in clicks. Lucy filled our plates generous enough to pass for love. The roast cut clean and rosemary riding the steam. She'd done everything a person could do to make the evening behave. It didn't. Leo swallowed wrong, washed panic with beer, and set the glass too hard. "Dad," he said, napkin folded, unfolded, folded. "I need help." "Of course," I said. Dangerous words a father learns not to throw around and throws anyway. Tell me what you're working on. He tried on 3 lies, and none fit. I had a project, he said. It went badly. The people who backed it. He groped for a polite noun. They're not the kind you keep waiting. How bad? I asked. He said a number that would make most men blink. I've trained myself not to. Under the table, my thumb found the seam where the leaf joins the round. 2 halves lining up if you respect the tolerances. I can help some, I said. More than some. But not all. Not without selling the house your mother and I built. Not without drowning myself. Calm even. A boundary taught by winters and wrenches. I can put 200,000 together by next week without taking on water. He barked a laugh that startled him. 200 won't touch the interest, he said. They want it all. Who? I asked. Investors, he said, and the word looked like a rented suit. Lucy's fork chimed against her plate. Leo, she whispered, voice breaking on his name. He saw her then, softened, hardened, looked away. I'm not asking you to sell anything, he told me. I'm asking you to save my life. There it was. The old key he thinks I still carry. The one that used to unlock consequences and let him sleep. I won't let them hurt you, I said. But I won't drown with you. That's not rescue. That's 2 victims. The hardest sentence I've said to him since the day I told him his mother was gone. He pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes until the skin went bloodless. When he lowered them, he looked like a man bracing a sagging beam with his back. Panic and shame and anger were all on the same circuit. 200, he repeated, dull now, as if testing the weight of a tool he didn't believe in. He scraped his chair. I need air. He snagged his phone, knocked the salt, didn't see it fall, and was out the door. Lucy stared at the spill, a small drift of white against the wood, and began gathering it with her fingers and a napkin like she was saving something soft from a hard floor. I helped. The radio in the kitchen hummed a song from 20 years ago. She turned on the tap and let water run without putting anything under it, a harmless sound to fill a dangerous room. You saw him on the porch, she said. I saw him, I said. He tells me not to worry. She took a breath that landed wrong in her chest. He checks the locks twice, then looks out the window like he didn't. She wiped her hands on the towel and set it down with care. Will your being here help? I don't know, I said. But I'll take the temperature and write a plan. Lists are how you turn fear into work. Leo came back in with the drizzle stitched into his hairline. He'd found his mask, calm as a suit jacket. He sat, touched the phone once, and left it. I figured it out, he said. Dad, thank you. The 200 will keep things moving. He said it like someone talking a bomb into sleeping. Tonight, how about a beer? Us. We can talk without worrying Lucy. He gestured her way without looking. The worst courtesy. I'm not porcelain, she said, a small smile not reaching her eyes. Of course you're not, he said softly, and for a heartbeat he was the boy standing on a shop stool, asking for the tiny flathead to pry open his radio. I owe him a few stories. I folded my napkin, checked my pockets, the useless old soldier in me mapping exits and weather. I looked at his hands. They'd stopped trembling. Not a rest. A brace. Plans calm him. The content of them comes second. Which place? I asked. He named a small bar a few blocks over, the one with a mirror behind the bottles that doubles the room and shows you a second face you weren't planning on seeing. Years ago, I'd celebrated a retirement there. Warm wood, low ceiling, regulars who don't bump by accident. In mirrors, men watch men without looking like they are. Lucy touched my sleeve, cool fingers, quick, in a whisper meant for me alone. Be careful. Not fear, a request. Bring back something I can live with. I'll be back, I said, which in my vocabulary means I'll do the work. We stepped into the damp and the wet decided to start again, ticking in the gutters like small parts dropped into a metal tray. Headlights washed over the hedges and turned them into moving shadows. Leo walked half a step ahead, glancing at the road like it owed him a sign. At the corner, he dimmed his phone until it was a pale rectangle nobody could see. I meant what I said, I told him as we walked. I'll help. I won't capsize my boat to climb into yours. He almost laughed and didn't. I know, Dad. He slid the phone away. The look he gave me belonged to a boy too small for the lie he'd been carrying. Eyes remember everything. We passed the florist, closed, wedding packages buckled behind fogged glass, and the pharmacy with posters for blood pressure cuffs I pretend not to need. The bus that had brought me hissed by, threw a sheet of water across the curb. Ahead, the bar sign hung from its bracket like a chalkboard wiped clean. After you, Leo said, catching the door. Warm brown air wrapped around us. Stools waited with the patience of old wood. The mirror waited with the same. I flexed my fingers, not to fight, but for grip. Grip is the prayer you say when you want threads to catch and not strip. The place hadn't changed. Low ceiling, varnish dark as tea. Stools polished by the same backs for 20 winters. A neon insect hummed in the corner. The long mirror doubled everyone and sold them back their second faces. Warm wood and damp wool. Old bar air. Leo steered us to a two-top with sightlines. Door, windows, restroom hall. The triangle you choose when your nerves are running a perimeter. He checked his phone. Screen dim. Nothing. Checked again anyway. A compact barman in his 50s drifted over. Gray at the temples. Athlete once or cop once. The stance told you he wouldn't tip easy. His eyes did quiet math. My sweater, Leo's knee bouncing under the table's angle to the door. Evening. What'll it be? Amber and a water, Leo said. The man's gaze rested on the face-down phone, then on me half a beat longer than manners. He nodded and went to pull the drinks. The door opened and drizzle came in like foil. Silver triangle, then 3 men. The first wore a dark raincoat over money. He carried himself like a man accustomed to being believed. The 2 behind him were the clean, useful kind. Thicker necks, cheap boots, scanning without obvious movement. They didn't look around much. The mirror did that for them. Leo didn't turn his head. His palm pressed flat to the table and came away damp. He wiped the spot with his sleeve, ashamed of sweat. His shoulders tipped to give one eye a clear line on the door. The barman set the beer and water down. His name tag was plain, Mark. He slid a coaster under my glass and leaned enough to make it look like service. You boys need menus? We're good, Leo said. Mark moved off. In the mirror, I watched him stash a small brown envelope under the register with 2 fingers, the way you hold a thing you won't drop but don't care to own. He lifted it, set it down, lifted it again. A weight test, or a signal. The 3 men took a table near the restroom hall. Raincoat faced the room. He sipped water like a man who takes care of the plumbing he can. His left-hand man had a jaw scar healed wrong, a zipper across meat. Leo lifted his beer and didn't drink. I'm sorry about dinner, he said. I didn't mean to. He let it trail. His eyes kept walking to the hall where the bathrooms were. You told what you could tell, I said. Right, he said. as if agreement could change the math. He glanced at his phone again. Back in a sec. He stood and left the beer full. He rested his palm on the phone a moment, like borrowing heat, then set it face down exactly parallel to the table edge. His one small act of control. He headed for the restroom hall. Scarjaw stood too, slow as a yawn, and meandered toward the bar instead, leaving Raincoat posted. He leaned in to say something to Mark. Mark's mouth did not smile. The envelope moved half an inch closer to Scarjaw and stopped. No one touched it. In the mirror, Leo's reflection slipped through the men's room door and vanished into tile and lemon bleach. Mark came to me. "Sir," he said, voice quiet enough to fall between songs. He placed another coaster he didn't need to place, which let him lean closer without leaning. Wintergreen and coffee on his breath. "You from out of town?" "Visiting," I said. He nodded like that answer had been on a card he'd already filled. "I'm going to say something I didn't say." His eyes flicked once to the far table and back. 2 minutes before you walked in, your boy met Romano on the sidewalk. Handed him an envelope. The two with him aren't ushers. Your boy brought you here to keep you in one frame and to point you at the glass if they needed a picture. Why tell me? I kept my hands flat. You learn not to spook skittish systems. Mark's eyes dipped to my hands, the way a man checks the tool he'll borrow. Because I used to stand in rooms where there weren't mirrors and things went worse, he said. Because I recognize fathers. Because I sleep better when men like you walk out unbroken. He didn't blink. Stand up, walk down that hall like you're taking your time, push through the kitchen, out the back. Don't go home. Show me, I said. He jerked his chin toward the register. Under the lip, a small monitor glowed black and white. The timestamp was wrong by 8 minutes. The camera angle was bad, blocked by a florist truck that had been parked crooked since noon. Still, it showed enough. Leo at the awning edge, right hand inside his jacket. Romano turned so to be recognized. The envelope left one hand and became someone else's. No handshake. That's what I've got, Mark said. No audio, no miracle. Enough to make a decision. He added, matter of fact, alley lights out since last week. Rear cam's blind behind that truck. Kitchen door is 6 paces past the men's room. Take a right in the alley. There's a cut by the florist dumpster. You'll come out on Maple. Left is a dead end unless you climb a chain link into the pharmacy lot. Your shoes'll hate you. And my son? I asked. Your son set the table, he said. A fact, not a verdict. You don't have to sit. He moved away the way a man moves when he's finished the part of the job he can live with. The water tasted like nothing. My heart didn't sprint. It nested into the steady rhythm work requires. I stood, slow enough that no one would see a start. In the mirror, Raincoat tasted his drink. Scarjaw watched his own reflection chew. I adjusted my chair like a man being polite and walked toward the restrooms. Wood changed to rubber tile. Beer posters to bad white paint. The air went bleach and fryer. The men's room door was swung half open. The hiss of the hand dryer came and went. The kitchen door had a push plate thumb dented by cooks. A handwritten reminder about washing hands was taped crooked. I pushed through. 2-line cooks worked the grill, steam climbing their faces like vines. One looked up, then down. Mark had already said whatever a man like him says to make a stranger part of the kitchen for 30 seconds. The back door had a chain that had been unhooked and hooked again for show. A square of wired glass. A dead fixture above 2 wet steps. Hold, Mark said softly behind me. He came up at my shoulder, flipped a toggle that made the outside light try and fail to wake. Shame about that bulb, he said in the exact tone of a man who doesn't believe in coincidences. He lifted a bar towel and draped it over the little window. Insurance is particular about towels. His eyes met mine. 10 seconds. No eyes. He palmed the crash bar, and cold air moved over my wrists. The alley was a throat narrowed by the florist truck's bulk, wet stitched light between brick faces. Somewhere metal clinked. A keg shifted, a door bumped by wind. I took the steps like a man walking a familiar ledge. Right turn. Dumpster shadow, 2 doors down. The smell of cut stems and rot. Palms brushed wet brick. The city's pulse steady in the masonry. Voices laid themselves along the alley, softened by water and angles. Tonight or tomorrow, same math, a man said. Sloped vowels, expensive patience. He's old. Roads do favors in the drizzle. We tag the line? That heavy voice belonged to Meat and Scar. One of them said to keep it simple, to let the spot choose itself. The rest was implied and didn't need a map. A third voice, amused. Or he clutches his chest before the turn. Natural Causes plays fine on a wet Tuesday. Don't improvise, the leader said. We're paid to be boring. Paid. Small word, heavy part. The plan sat simple as a torque spec. Use the tools I'd taught my son to respect. Turn them into a quiet accident. I hardly tasted the anger. What I felt was craftsmanship twisted wrong, like seeing a safety jack used as a murder weapon. Familiar physics, perverted. My son's 8-year-old voice came back, tinny as the little radio he'd asked me to pry open. Why do old cars stop slow? Because people lie to themselves about sponges, I'd told him. Because they want to go home. Keep the fluid clean. Don't rush the bleed. Don't tell yourself it's fine. Footfalls shifted. Not toward me. The truck turned sound into trick mirrors. I pictured the geometry. 3 men between kitchen door and truck nose. Mark with his thumb on a switch wired to nothing. Leo at a table counting backward from 60 before he'd come looking. Before he'd call my name down the hall. Move. Not panic. Procedure. I slid along the brick into the cut-through. 2 old posts, no gate, a habit of an alley. Water popped on the dumpster lid like corn. Maple Street's lamp made a narrow belt of light at the far end. I listened. No feet that weren't mine. I stepped out and kept walking. Florist windows ghosted with condensation, wedding packages on a poster bleeding ink. Across the way, a blinking save in the pharmacy window flickered between command and plea. A bus sighed, groaned, sluiced the curb with a sheet of water that licked my shoes. I did not look back down the alley. Looking isn't the same as seeing, and seeing isn't always useful. I took the long block to avoid passing the front. If someone followed, they'd have to choose speed or subtlety. Men who have to choose lose edges. At the far corner, a dead street lamp gave me cover. I stopped, listened to wet and refrigeration hum, and a far siren bending away. My hands hung steady at my sides. Still my hands. Still mine. I thought of Mark's risk. Not heroic. Expensive. He'd moved a towel, killed a light. Let me see a thing. In this city, that's teeth and windows on the line. He'd done the right amount and no more. Men like that live longer. I rounded the next corner, cut back toward the neighborhood. The porches here try to make safety by repetition. Chairs under eaves, cushions left out, wet magazines on tables. Safety can be manufactured. I didn't buy any. A dentist's office glowed in one inner room. I saw Margaret for a blink. laughing at me around a mouthful of tools, and put my palm on a parking meter until I could breathe. When it passed, it left that unfamiliar gift grief sometimes leaves me, steadier than before. Lists wrote themselves. Lucy first, then cash, then the Ford, then where not to sleep. Then why not the police yet? Because a statement is air and air is not shelter. Because leverage cuts both ways. Because Lucy is leverage if I make noise. I'd write it in my notebook later so I couldn't lie to myself about sequence. My phone buzzed once in my pocket, a haptic nudge like a small animal. I didn't take it out. It would be Leo in a minute, then 5, then 15. Dad? You good? Bathroom? He'd invent benevolence to make room for his plan. The plan would flex. It wouldn't break. The men in the alley had said tonight or tomorrow. His clock had hours left to lie to him. At the four-way, the little white man lit and walked. I crossed with him. Drizzle ran off the brim of my cap and down the back of my neck. I checked my reflection in a parked van's window, not for vanity, for taillights that weren't there. My face looked like what it is, a man who has spent his life turning bolts in cold rooms. The mouth had gone a line. The eyes were doing the math nobody pays you to do. Behind me, the bar's mirror still had a second Frank sitting in it, waiting to see what man I'd be. I'd made my first decision. The next ones had to be faster and cleaner. I flexed my fingers once, not to fight, but to keep grip. Grip is what keeps threads from stripping. Grip is prayer with skin on it. I walked into the wet and didn't look back. I cut 2 blocks wide of the bar before angling back toward their street. The drizzle had settled into that fine grit that makes light feel like metal dust. Porch lamps came on in sequence as if a careful hand were testing circuits. I kept my pace steady. Panic is a tool people use wrong. Over-torqued, it shears the head off the bolt. At the corner before their house, I stopped under a maple that had traded most of its leaves for puddles. From there I could see the porch, but not be seen from it. The lavender Lucy had set looked gray, water-beaded. No unfamiliar cars, no silhouettes pressed to glass. I waited a full count of 60. The only movement was the wet sliding down the gutter chain in coins. I went in the side gate I'd oiled last summer. The fence remembered me and didn't squeal. The kitchen window gave me the room in a single pane. Lights low, plates in the drying rack. Lucy's towel folded precise on the counter. Their bedroom door down the hall was closed. My name was nowhere in the air. Good. The back door has 2 sounds, the latch and the weather strip. If you pull wrong, the strip complains. I pulled right. Inside, I stood still until the room stopped noticing me. I listened the way you listen to a car you didn't assemble. What's normal, what's not. Refrigerator hum, baseboard tick as hot water runs. A neighbor's music 6 houses over. No voices. No steps. I wrote the note at the counter. Kept it short, not because I had little to say, but because clarity is mercy. Lucy, Leo's in danger over a debt. The people he owes may come to the house. For your safety, go to your mother's now. No calls, no texts from your phone. I'll contact you from a number you don't know. Take only essentials. Lock after you. Frank. I read it once for leaks. Nothing vague enough to be misread. Then set it under the magnet with the photo of them in front of the pumpkin farm. I opened a drawer, took an empty envelope, wrote Lucy, now on it, and slid the folded sheet inside. I left it where her eye would fall before habit could. In the bedroom, I packed for them. 1 small duffel, change of clothes for Lucy, toiletries, a sweater, paperwork folder from the desk with her passport, socials, insurance cards. I didn't take their marriage certificate. Paper cuts both ways. If Leo needed to retrieve documents later, he could. I took her spare car key from the bowl by the door and left Leo's. When you try to strip a system, don't strip it of what the other person will need to rebuild right. On the hall table, their landline base blinked with a missed call. I pulled the cord from the back, wound it once, and set the phone in the hall closet behind the vacuum. It looks petty until you see where pettiness saves lives. I took my jacket and the duffel and slipped out the back again, resetting the latch the way I'd found it. At the mouth of the alley, I waited again and did the slow scan that keeps you alive. Windows, mirrors, drizzle slick surfaces. No watchers. I walked the 2 blocks to the lot where Lucy keeps her car when Leo takes the driveway. A Corolla the color of nickel sat under a street tree, leaf prints oiled on the hood. I unlocked, slid the duffel in, and sat with the engine off until my breath matched the wet's counting. I called Lucy from my phone and counted 3 rings. She answered on the first, like she'd been holding the phone in both hands. "Frank? I'm in your car around the corner. Read the envelope on the fridge. Then come alone," I said. 10 seconds in and out. "Lock behind you." "Is he?" "He's with me in spirit," I said. "Move now." I hung up. You don't keep a line open when a line can become a leash. While I waited, I wrote the next list on the back of an old oil change receipt in my wallet. 1. Lucy out. 2. Cash. 3. Ford. 4. Lawyer. 5. Phone plan. 6. Sleep not at home. The order did not feel poetic. It felt practical enough to live. Lucy came down the sidewalk fast, hood up, keys in her fist the wrong way. A movie idea, not a weapon. She looked around too much, the way civilians do when they're new to fear. I tapped the horn once and she came to the passenger side and slid in. The duffel startled her. Then she understood and nodded fast. "I left him a text," she started. "No texts," I said. "Your phone is a lantern right now." She swallowed and put the phone, dark, face down in the cup holder, as if it could hear instructions. "What is this? What did he do?" "He borrowed from men who sell payback as a service," I said. "Tonight they wanted a picture of me framed by a mirror." No drama. A torque spec. "You're going to your mother's. You'll stay until you hear from me from a number you don't know. You won't answer unknowns. You won't answer Leo." She stared through the windshield. "I can't leave him." "You aren't leaving him," I said. "You're refusing to be leverage." Her mouth opened and closed on the word leverage like it had burrs. She nodded, then nodded again. "He'll be so angry," she whispered, and I could hear the long history braided into the sentence. "He might be," I said. "Anger is cheap. We're buying time." I pulled away, smooth and slow. The Corolla did its small, competent best. I took back streets and quiet turns, no drama, bearing north toward her mother's small house 2 towns up. Lucy watched the mirrors even as she tried not to. 10 blocks in, she exhaled as if she'd been holding her breath since the day she married him. "What did you see at the bar?" she asked. "Enough," I said. The back of my mind ran the alley voices again like a film leader. Brake line, sponge pedal, 4-way stop. I kept my tone clean of it. An envelope that wasn't a letter. Men who get paid to be ordinary. She flinched at unremarkable the way I had. It is exactly the word a certain cruelty uses. Traffic thinned to nothing. The fields started. Dark panels dotted with the white of wrapped hay bales. A geometry I've loved since I learned to drive. Drizzle on the windshield is the sound of the world learning your pace. Lucy shook once. Whole body, the tremor a person gets when adrenaline backs down and lets blood in. Say what you want to say, I told her. She shook her head stubbornly. Then, he hasn't been sleeping. He checks the locks and then sits on the edge of the bed like he can hold the house steady by sitting still. He started smoking again. He thinks I don't smell it. She laughed without humor. He keeps saying, it's handled. He's using your words. They're not my words, I said gently. They're the words I use when the work is handled. She pushed the heel of her hand against her mouth. He's good, she said through it, as if the word needed defending. He's kind. He brings me tea when I'm grading and puts his hand on my shoulders the way. She stopped. I don't want to hate him later for something he's doing now because he's afraid. You don't have to hate him, I said. You have to not be hurt by the people he invited into your life. It sounded colder than I meant. It also sounded true. We pulled into her mother's street, one of those run of low houses, old flags limp in the wet. Porch swings bolted because winter wrenched the first anchors loose. I cut the headlights half a house early. We rolled to the curb. I stayed in gear and didn't set the brake so the car wouldn't jerk when we left. You know the drill, I said. 10 seconds. Essentials only. No explanations to your mother beyond work emergency and I'll call soon. She'll intuit the rest. Lucy squeezed my hand and hard. Thank you, she said, for writing the note I could obey. You always did have a good ear for instructions, I said, and it was the closest I came to a joke. She ran. The porch light clicked on, and her mother came as far as the screen door, comfort wrapped in a housecoat. I watched silhouettes embrace through the screen. I watched Lucy turn and hold up a hand. Wait, then vanish inside. I counted. At 10, she came back with a second sweater and a zip pouch. She blew me a small, practical kiss. Not romance, gratitude for velocity. I pulled off before the door finished swinging shut. Back south, the road gave me the quiet that lets work expand. The wipers knocked time. I dialed my own voicemail and left a message I would later use as a receipt to myself. Lucy safe. Proceeding to 3. Ford. Hearing it in my ear made it real. I reached my street before 10. The Ford sat in the drive under the maple that drops helicopter seeds on the hood. The truck looked like a companion that had waited correctly. Square, calm, ready to carry weight. I parked 2 houses down, nose out. I got out into the drizzle with my small flashlight and a plastic drop sheet. I went to my knees on the wet and slid under the truck, the way you slide under a story to see where the leak is. Make the pedal a sponge, the tall one said. He didn't name a time or corner. He didn't have to. I checked the front lines too because thoroughness is a superstition with me. When I came out from under the truck, my jacket was a thin river. I wiped my hands on a rag that lives in my back pocket and put my fingers to the hood metal to ground myself. The Ford wasn't a bomb tonight. They didn't know where I kept it or how fast I'd run. Good. Tomorrow is still a place they think they own. Tonight is mine. Inside, my house smelled like the neutral sum of wood and dust and radiator heat. I locked the door behind me and put the chain on. In the kitchen, I set a pot on for tea because Margaret's ghost still asks for it when I've done a hard thing. I spread the oil change receipt on the table and added to the list with wet fingers. 3. Ford checked. 4. Lawyer, will and copies. 5. Phones, burner, silence. 6. Where not to sleep. Here, Leo's, anywhere routine. 7. Mark. Debt owed. not the kind with interest. The kettle clicked off. I didn't make tea. I poured hot water into a mug and held it as a hand warmer, and a reminder that my hands were still mine. Then I took out my wallet and counted cash. 600 and change. Enough for a night and a lawyer retainer if he likes me. I went to the safe behind the paint cans, spun the dial, and took the envelope I shouldn't have kept. Old habit money from a time when a man could fix most days with it. Added it to the stack. Wrote the new total next to 2. Cash like I was pricing parts. My phone lay on the table face down. It pulsed once, then again in a longer pattern. I flipped it and watched the caller ID give me Leo and a Leo and Leo with the patience of a machine that believes in infinite tries. I let it go to voicemail. He texted, "You okay? Bathroom?" Then, "Call me, need to talk." Then, "Dad?" Then the lie showed up to make room. "Everything's fine. Come back." I turned the phone off at the side button and set it in a bowl with my keys. The bowl looked like a mouth holding back a shout. I considered the police. I laid the thought out like a part on a bench. On one side, men in an alley describing a plan to kill me. On the other, no names I could swear to without pinning Mark to the board with me. A son who had handed off an envelope but not a confession. A wife who would become a lever if the wrong ears heard the right fear. A detective might be the right man at the wrong time. Air and paperwork are not shelter. I wrote, "Police later with counsel, not yet." Writing it down took away the temptation to lie to myself about courage. I went upstairs. I changed into dry clothes and stood at the bedroom window while Wet combed the street. Across the way, Mrs. Harris's television made the blue flicker of a game show in her front room. Somewhere a cat screamed briefly at a decision it had made. Grief slid its usual palm along my ribs. Margaret would have called me stubborn, and then put her hand in the back of my neck and stood there until my breathing matched hers. I rubbed the back of my neck the way she used to, and felt the skin heat to my own hand. In the top drawer, I keep the notebook with the rubber band. I opened to a fresh page and wrote names and times and things said. I wrote Romano with a question mark, because Mark hadn't gifted me that name by accident. I wrote bar 9, so 2, 9:18 p.m., envelope, bathroom, back, light out, delivery truck, cut to maple, voices. Under voices, I wrote 3 lines close to how they had sounded, without making a transcript I'd be ashamed to hand to a lawyer. You don't embroider evidence you might need to wear. A memory pushed up from a place I hate opening. Leo at 19. The first time I bailed him out of a mess that called itself a business class, he'd taken from a man who sold courses out of a motel, the motel key stuck halfway in the lock. I had to jiggle it twice, lost a minute and changed the route I thought I'd take. He'd come home with vitamins he called a stack, and a plan to pay me back by reselling the same stack to friends. I'd told him no, and then no again, and then how much. The third time, because the third time his voice had that shake in it that tells a father the cliff is closer than the child knows. I didn't teach him to scam. I taught him that the world would make a small accommodation for his fear. Tonight I had told him the accommodation was closed. He'd built a bridge over that closure with other men's money. My phone stayed dark. I left it that way. I dug in the hall closet for the old flip phone we kept for storms and found it under a coil of extension cord. 2 bars when I plugged it in. I used it to call a number a retired coworker had pressed on me with a look that said, "Use this only when things are not a story you can tell at a picnic." The lawyer answered on his own line in a voice with coffee in it. "Frank." "I need to revise a will tomorrow morning," I said. "And I need a consult before I talk to any badge." Quietly. "I can do 9, he said. Paper sounds in the background. Bring ID and whatever you think I'll need to tell you to throw away. I'm not throwing away anything, I said. I'm bringing a notebook. Better, he said. You sleeping at home? No. Text me from a number I don't know when you're parked, he said, and hung up with the affection of men who trust brevity. I put the flip in my pocket and left the smartphone dead in its bowl. I took a small bag with socks and a shirt and Margaret's photo in its cheap frame because I am superstitious where it counts. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the house a way you look at a workshop before you lock up. Are the blades stored, the rags binned, the switches off, the smell right? Everything looked the way it should. That meant little. It meant enough. I left by the back to keep the drizzle from the hall runner. The Ford took on the work without a complaint. I backed out of the neighborhood with the lights off until the corner and then set them low. I didn't take the highway. I took the single lane that runs past the old mill where the river makes the noise that hides other noises. I drove not fast, but decisive. I kept checking the mirrors for headlights that made the wrong decisions, and none did. Halfway to nowhere, I pulled into the motel that hadn't bothered to change its sign since the 80s. Vacancy flickered with the dignity of a tired prizefighter. I parked under a dead camera on purpose. The clerk didn't look up from a tablet. I slid cash across like a man who likes paper more than plastic, and took a key with a real weight to it. Room 12 smelled like cleaner and old carpet, and the ghost of cigarettes the management pretends never happened. I set the chair under the knob, the noisier precaution, and stood for a long minute with my palm on the cool door, like I could keep the night out by touch. I showered hot and let the water hit the back of my neck until the part of my brain that wants to imagine alternatives wore itself to a usable dull. I didn't turn on the TV. I spread the notebook on the little round table and added a line. Lucy safe? Mother's. Then another. Mark. Small debt of honor. Then, Leo, call to be returned when there is a reason beyond guilt. The list looked like a man's life after a storm. Fewer things, truer names. Sleep didn't come right away. That's all right. I lay on my back with the towel over the pillow because the pillow smelled like old men who hadn't made good decisions. My hands rested on my chest, one over the other, the weight of my own tools. Somewhere inside the hum of the motel, a couple argued in muffled syllables, then laughed, then went quiet. I thought about a brake line and a four-way and the way towns nod when bad news arrives wearing a plausible coat. I thought about how I would sit in a notary's office with wet above and answer yes when asked if I was certain. I didn't practice the line. My hand knows how to sign my name when it has to. The room air unit clicked and coughed into a new setting. The sound was like a small machine finding a stable idle. My breathing matched it without being ordered. Outside, the drizzle kept at its accounting. Inside, I set the pen down parallel to the paper's blue lines and turned off the light. The dark was clean. I wasn't hiding. I was working. I woke before the alarm because old habits live closer to the surface than sleep. The motel air unit had settled into a steady hum. No rattles, no surprises. I like machines that pick a speed and keep it. The room was the color of early weather. I boiled the travel kettle I carry because I don't trust motel coffee and poured hot water into a mug to warm my hands. I wasn't cold. I wanted the weight. At 6, I walked the length of the balcony in a slow, unremarkable patrol and let the wet name what was familiar. Tar, wet pine, the copper tang a river leaves when it carries silt high. No parked cars that didn't belong. No men waiting to be obvious. Boredom is a blessing. On the table, the list waited where I'd left it. I added 2 more lines. Truck decoy and alternate wheels. If men who get paid to be low-key decided tomorrow, I wanted tomorrow to have wrong information. The clerk sold gas in the morning out of a shed with a bell that rang when you opened the door. He didn't look up from a tabloid. Fill on 2, I said, cash forward. I bought a roll of duct tape and a cheap ball cap in a gray no one would remember seeing. The clerk gave me a pen with the motel's name. Keep it, he said, as if he'd given me something good. Back at the truck, I taped a handwritten "For sale" call sign inside the passenger window with the number of a dead phone I knew by heart from an old parts supplier. A lie with soft edges. I wiped the plate with a cloth and smeared a little road dirt across the bumper, where men rest their wrists when they talk. Then I drove the Ford to the big box store lot a mile away, parked under a camera that worked, and walked 2 rows over to a sedan with a "For sale" sign that had gathered a month of drizzle. I called the number. A woman answered, hope already braced for disappointment. Still available? I asked. If you have cash, she said. An hour later, I had the title to a decade-old Camry with tired shocks and a reliable anonymity. The seller cried when I didn't haggle. I told her the truth I could carry. I need a favor to go right. I left the Ford where it could be seen doing nothing and took the Camry where it would not be seen doing anything. At 8:40, I parked 2 blocks from the lawyer's office and texted the number he'd given me from the flip. Outside. Alone. He opened the door himself. Thick hair going to steel, shirt sleeves, the calm of a man who has seen worse and spent it into paperwork you can live with. You look like a man who slept in a chair, he said. I slept, I said, sitting up. We sat at a table that understood signatures. I put the notebook down and the driver's license on top of it. He read my list the way a mechanic reads a service history, not for the first problem, but for the first lie. Walk me through it and tell me where you're afraid you're exaggerating, he said. One of them said to keep it simple, to let the spot choose itself. The rest was implied and didn't need a map. That's not a coincidence, he said. That's a script. I know scripts, I said. This one ends with a town nodding. He tapped the notebook. You're not calling the police yet because you don't have a story you can safely lodge and then leave, and because your daughter-in-law is leverage until she's nowhere near your son. That's not cowardice. That's triage. He slid a form across. We'll do the will first. I brought the old one. We'll supersede it, he said, neat satisfaction in the word. This time we lodge copies with me and with the county, and we put one in a safe that isn't in your house. No bedside versions to be found and swapped. You are removing your son entirely, yes? Yes. He looked at me, not unkindly. You get 1 line for sentiment if you want it. The rest is names and numbers. Make the sentiment a fact, I said. He isn't a beneficiary because he's a danger to himself and to the people tied to him. That's 2 lines. I approve. He wrote as if he'd been waiting to write that exact thing for someone. We went through the motions. Witnesses from the front desk. Stapler click. My hand steady over my name. The grief didn't arrive as a wave. It arrived as an adjustment, like standing up too fast and catching yourself on the back of a chair. When it was done, he slid a plain envelope toward me. 1 certified copy, he said. 1 stays here. 1 goes to the clerk by lunch. I'll have a receipt by 2. If anyone asks, you had an appointment to revise. Because you did. I'll email you a letter to that effect you can waive if you need to. He paused. Now, the other thing. Romano, I said. This city has two Romanos, he said. One makes gelato. One makes funerals go the way families want. The second has a nephew who thinks he's a businessman. He looked at me. Don't talk to any badge without me in the room. When we do talk, we'll bring enough to be taken seriously and not enough to be dangerous to the wrong people. Is that a legal strategy or a weather report? I asked. Both, he said. This afternoon, I'll put in a quiet call that says a client has reason to fear a staged accident. It creates a timestamp. It also gets you on the radar of the officer who doesn't like staged accidents. He's not the officer who eats with Romano's friends. I nodded. Thank you. He tucked the notebook back toward me with 2 fingers. And Frank, he said softer, text your daughter-in-law from the flip, not the smart. Phones are nets. Don't be a fish. Outside, the wet had taken a break and left the city blinking. I sat in the Camry long enough to send a single line to Lucy from a number she didn't know. Safe? The reply came 5 minutes later, which told me she'd had to take the phone to a room with a closed door. With Mom. Doors locked. I'm okay. I typed good and deleted everything else. Then I called my own dead smartphone from the flip and left a message so the machine would have a witness. Lawyer at 9. Will revised. Copies lodged. Police. Later today. With counsel. My voice sounded like a man who had chosen a speed and picked it. I didn't want to go back to my house, and I didn't want to be seen not going anywhere. So I drove to the self-storage yard and rented a 5x10 with a roll-up door and the smell of old cardboard. I moved 3 boxes from my basement that I didn't want a raid to paw through. Margaret's letters, the family photo album, the ledger from the shop with names I still say thank you to when I can't sleep. I put the notebook in a new box labeled Tools because no one steals heavy things. At noon, sitting in the Camry with the window down enough to make the air honest, my phone vibrated with a number I knew too well. Dad? I almost let it go to voicemail. There are calls you answer because not answering is a lie. I answered and let him hear the quiet. Where are you? He asked, not yet angry, not entitled, scared and trying not to leak it. Out, I said. You left, he said. The accusation sounded less like anger than like the world had done something out of order. At the bar. I went to the restroom and came back and you were gone. I took a different door, I said. He breathed, like he was recording the conversation for an alibi and wanted to edit breath out. Dad, listen. Last night was messy. I said some things. You said some things. But we can fix it. Come over. We'll talk with Lucy. I'll make coffee. We'll figure out the 200 and a plan. I already have a plan, I said. It starts with you not seeing Lucy until I say so. Silence. Then a small, wounded noise. She's my wife. She's a person I promised Margaret I'd protect if I had to, I said. Right now, she's safer not being a lever. His voice rose, then broke, then flattened. I don't know what you think you heard last night, but I swear to God. I didn't think I heard anything, I said, not raising mine. I heard enough. I saw enough. Another breath. This one ragged. You went sneaking around. That's what you did. You went listening in places where... I went breathing through my own mouth, I said, because you were trying to breathe through mine. He swallowed. I could hear it. Okay, he said. New tactic. Okay, you're angry. You have a right. I messed up. These guys, Dad, they don't... He stopped. I'll fix it. Meet me, please. You're making it worse. You hired them to make it final. I said. Worse doesn't scare me. He sobbed once or choked. I didn't know. Listen, I was talking big. I was trying to. He ran out of sentence like a car runs out of shoulder. I need the 200 today, he said. To hold them off. I'll pay you back. You'll see. I've got a. You're still calling it a plan, I said. It's a choice. That's the part you keep skipping. You stand in rooms full of mirrors and you choose. His voice went small. 8 years old. First lie too big to carry. Dad, please. You're my son, I said, and kept my voice from shaking by spreading the words on the table of my mouth and lining their edges. And I love you, and I will not die for your choice, and I will not let you use Lucy to make me. He stopped talking. The line hung. In the open space, I could hear a television in his house, a neighbor's mower, the cheap clock in their kitchen he never changed for daylight saving. So that's it, he said at last, tight. You're cutting me off. I'm cutting the line you keep trying to tie around my neck, I said. I'm cutting the habit where my help is your permission. I'll meet with a detective this afternoon with counsel. If I need to say your name, I will. Jesus, he whispered. You'd go to the cops. I'd go to anyone I have to so I don't end up under a headline with a picture of the church four-way, I said. I'll also go to the truth. It's cheaper in the long run. He inhaled, slow. I pictured him at the sink with his palm on the counter, nails white. You think this makes you the hero, he said. Ugly now because he needed me to be something other than a father who wasn't coming. You think you're strong, you're old, you're tired. You don't have the. He cut himself off like he'd nearly said guts or stomach and remembered whose those words used to be. Fine, he said. Do whatever you want. The old brittle boy came back for a blink. You'll be sorry you didn't trust me. I've been sorry for years, I said. I'm choosing a different sorry. He hung up. I didn't look at the phone like it had done something wrong. I set it face down and let the car warm around me with quiet. Across the way, a gray sedan drove by the mouth of the storage yard twice in 5 minutes. Too slow the first time, too deliberate the second. The third pass, it didn't come back. It parked 2 blocks down where the curb cuts into a little triangle of grass. A neighbor with nothing to do. A placeholder. I took down the plate on the paper's corner and didn't chase. Men who are being watched badly do stupid things. Men who think they're being watched do worse. I decided to be a man who acted like the world was normal until it wasn't. At 2, the lawyer texted the single word lodged and a photo of the clerk's receipt with a timestamp. It looked like a string tied to a kite. If the weather took me, something would still point to where I'd been. I drove to a bank branch I used for the shop years back and walked in with a hat and the posture of a man handling an ordinary errand. I opened a small safe deposit box and put inside the certified copy of the new will, the ledger, and a note on yellow paper. If you're reading this because I'm not, the truth is low-key and important. I closed the lid and watched the clerk turn the key in a way that told me she'd had good training and no reason yet to be afraid. On the way back to the Camry, my flip vibrated once. A voicemail from a number without a name. I didn't press play until I was moving. Frank, it's Lucy, she said, her voice low and aiming for steady. I'm safe. Mom made soup and is pretending I'm on vacation. I left Leo a note that says I'm with you. I didn't say where. I'm sorry if that makes trouble. I wanted him to know he can't. She exhaled. I'm okay. I thought you'd want to know I'm okay. A pause. Thank you for the envelope on the fridge. It helped me not think. The line clicked like she'd hung up fast to keep bravery from running out. Proof of life, not safety, a choice. I let the relief be small and efficient and not a flood. Floods kill as many good houses as fires. By late afternoon, the drizzle leaned inland and the clouds unbuttoned a few inches of sky. I drove the long way back toward my side of town, past the church with the four-way and the limp red octagons. I stopped a block short and watched. Cars pretended not to see one another until the last second, then were polite. The intersection held its breath and exhaled on schedule. I pictured my name in a column and put the picture away. The day ended the way good days pretend to. Hardware store, parking lot, people moving like their errands were the exact right size. I sat there long enough to make a decision feel like a decision. Then I dialed the lawyer and said, "I'm ready to talk to the detective." "Evening shift's better," he said. "Fewer visitors in the lobby. Come by, I'll walk you in." "Will it make noise in the wrong direction?" I asked. "Everything makes noise," he said. "We'll tune it." The sun thought about lowering itself and decided to wait for me. I pulled the cap low, checked the mirrors, and let the Camry find its steady. Somewhere a gray sedan wondered if it was clever. Somewhere a bar mirror kept my second face in reserve. Somewhere my son paced a kitchen and practiced a story that would keep him from hearing his own. I put my hands on the wheel the way a man holds a tool he's used for a long time, and drove toward the part where telling the truth becomes a shelter. Evening shift at the precinct smells like coffee. You could stand a wrench in and wet carried in on coats. The lawyer met me at the curb, sleeves rolled, tie in his pocket like he'd bargained with the day and both sides had settled. We went in together. You talk different when a man like him is 2 steps ahead of you. Cleaner, shorter, truer. At the desk, he asked for a specific detective by first name like he was ordering a part he knew was in stock. The officer at the glass slid us visitor stickers without the question that invites a speech. We sat on government chairs that make all backs the same height. "Evening," the detective said when he came out. 40s, clean shoes, the posture of someone who has made a career of letting other people talk first. He shook my hand, then the lawyer's, then sat at the angle that put his notebook where the room's camera could see, and his face where I could. "I'm not going to dance," the lawyer said. "My client believes there's an active conspiracy to stage an accident. He has dates, times, and details. He is not naming family unless you insist, because he's not ready to increase the leverage against them. We're here to make a record, not a splash." The detective lifted a palm. "Slow down, not shut up." "Let me hear it," he said, pen waiting, eyes not. One of them said to keep it simple, to let the spot choose itself. The rest was implied and didn't need a map. He wrote like a man who intends to read his notes later. "The bar?" "Small, polished glass. Owner's name is Mark." I said it careful. He'll deny saying anything. He did not overhear a plan. He observed a handoff and recognized faces he knows by trade. "Romano," the detective said, almost a sigh, like a bolt that strips if you look at it wrong. "I'm not saying that name on the record," the lawyer cut in. "You didn't," the detective said. He looked back to me. "Do you have reason to believe your vehicle is targeted?" "Make the pedal a sponge," the tall one said. He didn't name a time or corner. He didn't have to. He nodded once, sharp. "Anything else relevant?" "Yes," I said, and put Lucy in the right place. Safe, not a contact point, not a witness. I didn't say her mother's street. I didn't say the motel. I listed what I had lodged and where. Will copies, safe deposit box, receipt time. He wrote that too. Okay. He closed the notebook without standing, which felt like respect. You did 3 things I like. Time-stamped your fear with counsel, moved the vulnerable out of the frame, and checked your own vehicle without performing heroics. That makes you a person I take seriously. He slid a card across. 2 numbers. The top one's the reported line. The bottom's my desk. If anything changes, anything, you call the bottom number. You say the word break, and your last name, and you keep talking until I tell you to stop. Will you knock on doors? The lawyer asked. Gently, the detective said. Not at the bar. Not yet. I will make a phone call that adjusts some people's tomorrow into not today. And I'm going to put a patrol car near the church intersection for the next week and act like we're doing a seatbelt campaign. Bored cops scare men who are paid to be ordinary. He looked at me again. No routines, no predictable routes. Do you own anything that looks like a routine you can cancel? Cancel it. I already did, I said. He stood, shook both our hands like he was finishing a job properly, and walked us to the door. It was still raining, a light that polishes the city rather than dissolves it. On the sidewalk, the lawyer let the wet touch his face and grinned without comedy. That's about as much daylight as we get without buying it in blood, he said. Now we do the other thing. The notary, I said. The notary, he agreed. The clerk's copy is lodged, but I like ceremony. Ceremony makes the hand remember what it did. We walked 2 blocks to a strip of offices with lights still on. The notary's glass door had a decal of a shield with a quill through it. Official and faintly ridiculous. Inside, the room was warmer than it needed to be. A stray fern limped into the corner light. A woman in her 60s looked up with the steady competence of someone who has long since stopped being surprised by men who show up in the drizzle to pay money to sign their names. Evening, Irene, the lawyer said. We're going to make Frank here poor in the way that keeps him alive. She smiled like that was her favorite poverty. ID? She asked, and kind. I handed mine over and she compared faces with the exactness I respect in any craft. The lawyer set the documents down. The wet ticked the windows like fingers. Are you certain you want to do this, Mr. Walsh? She asked. Not because she doubted, but because the ritual requires that question so the answer has a place to sit. I took the photo of Margaret from my pocket and set it on the desk where the lamp could find her hair. Not for drama, for company. I looked at Irene, then at the signature line, then at my hands. They were steady. They looked like what they have always been. Tools I've used until they fit me back. Absolutely, I said. She slid the pen across. I signed the line that made my son a stranger to my estate and Lucy a person, not an appendage to him. Irene stamped and signed and dated and slid the papers into the folder with the quiet clicks of a job you can do well even when your heart is tired. The lawyer made a duplicate set and marked them with a red tab and wrote client on the tab in a hand that made all the letters stand up straight. You'll go home now, Irene said as she handed the folder, and it'll feel like nothing changed. And tomorrow you'll put your hand on a doorknob and feel it in your bones that it did. It already does, I said. On our way out, the lawyer stopped like he'd remembered something minor and important. If your son calls tonight, he said, and he will, don't argue. Say nothing that can be cut and set somewhere you don't control. If you need a line, use this. I'm not discussing strategy on an insecure line. It sounds low-key. Plain keeps you alive. Low-key, I repeated, tasting the word. The alley men had used it like a weapon. I could use it like a shield. We split at the corner. He went back to his office light. I walked to the Camry, put the folder on the passenger seat, and drove nowhere special for a while, moving through the slow grid of streets until my head stopped trying to make a movie out of a report. I passed the church with the four-way and saw a patrol car idling at the curb, windows fogged, two silhouettes inside doing the honest boredom that scares professionals. For the first time in 2 days, I didn't feel like an accident waiting for its cue. The gray sedan showed up again 3 blocks from my house, as if it had forgotten what it was supposed to pretend to be. It parked where the curb angles into a shallow V of grass, a place a student driver chooses because it feels like a trick. I didn't pull in. I drove past, turned at the next light, looped around, and stopped in a different street entirely. From there, a long diagonal gave me the silhouette of my own front porch. No one on it. No light on inside. I hadn't left that way. I sat with the engine off until the house stopped feeling like a stage and went back to feeling like a box that keeps drizzle where wet belongs. My flip phone buzzed. Restricted. I let it hop twice before answering. Frank? Lucy. Low. Breath-controlled. The calm that takes work. Don't talk. Listen. He came by Mom's. He knocked like a gentleman. He said he was worried about me and wanted to bring me home. I didn't open the door. I told him through the wood that I was safe and that you told me not to move. He tried my name 3 times. Then he said, "You're making it worse." And the 3rd time his voice sounded like it always does when he's building a story. He left. The porch camera caught him. I sent the clip to myself and then deleted it from Mom's cloud. A breath. I'm okay. Good, I said. I wanted to say 10 other things and I said the one that fit. You did it right. I know, she said, and you could hear the pride under the tremor. I'm staying. I'll call tomorrow. Use this number, I said, not the smart. I will. We hung up. I put my palm against the steering wheel and let the relief be small and exact, the way a bolt comes loose after the 3rd steady pull and not the first 2. At the curb, a man walked his dog past the gray sedan without looking, which is the way you look when you have decided that a thing is furniture. The sedan's engine ticked once, then settled. It didn't matter. Tomorrow it would be parked somewhere else, and I would be somewhere else again. Men who get paid to be plain hate variables. I was turning my life into one. I did not sleep at home. I slept in the chair at the motel with the door chain set and the folder in my hand, like a book too heavy to read. Morning came like a shop light. I boiled water, wrote a short new list on the back of a receipt, and crossed off the first item before the ink dried. Talked to detective. The act of crossing off steadied me better than tea. The next week did not become a war. It became work. I drove different routes. I varied the hour I left and the hour I came back and the fact of coming back at all. I spoke to the detective twice more. He told me nothing I could use and everything I needed to keep moving. Pressure applied. No seatbelts at the church 4-way today. Stay low-key. Mark and I did not speak. Once I walked past the bar at noon and saw a man on a ladder replacing the dead alley light. The ladder had a permit strapped to it. Some miracles announced themselves as invoices. On Thursday, a florist truck that wasn't the truck blocked the alley and then didn't. Deliberately plain. Friday, the gray sedan disappeared, replaced by a blue one with the same lazy patience. I wrote both plates down and then ripped the corner off the page and dropped it in a trash can that stank of coffee grounds and onion peels. The truth is plain and important. So is the discipline of not keeping souvenirs. Saturday morning, I took the Camry out to the edge of the county where a notary I didn't need witnessed a short letter I did. To whom it may concern, if this appears among my effects. Understand that everything done here was done with a steady hand. It wasn't insurance. It was a way of making my hand remember itself. Sunday, it rained again. Not storm, that steady drop that cleans the edges off things. I drove to the cemetery because there are conversations you can only hold on that day. Margaret's stone has our name and nothing clever. The one thing we agreed on from the start. I stood under my cap and told her what I had done with the will and why. I signed where you would have, I said out loud, because the body listens when the mouth tells it what it did. I told her I'd kept my promise to protect Lucy and not create a lie to live in. I told her I might have to give the detective more than a caution, and that if I did, I wouldn't flinch, and that flinching is different from regret. The drizzle made the words feel heavier and less temporary. On the way back, I drove past the church with the four-way. A patrol car idled there again. The officer inside yawned a yawn bigger than the window. A minivan rolled its stop and then stopped harder, apologized to the intersection with a wave. The world was refusing, politely, to conspire. At home, not to sleep, to stand. I walked room to room like a foreman at closing. The bowls, the rags, the tools, the quiet. I took Margaret's photo out of my pocket and set it on the kitchen table and set my hand beside it and looked at both the same way, like they were parts that had to fit. Then I took the folder and the notebook and put them in the box marked Tools in the storage unit and locked the metal door and rolled it down in one clean motion. Evening came on like the color of steel. I went back to Irene's office because I like the way endings look under lamplight with paper and a stamp. She wasn't there. The receptionist was, tapping a calendar with a red pen. "He left this for you," she said, and handed me an envelope with my name in the lawyer's print. Inside, a copy of the clerk's receipt with a second stamp, filed and indexed, and a sticky note in the lawyer's square hand. Your signature was steady. Keep it that way. I folded the paper in thirds and put it behind my driver's license where it would ride against me when I moved. Outside, the wet had turned finer than breath. I stood under the overhang and let it find my knuckles. A man can tell his own story a lot of ways. Most of them are excuses. I had one I could live in. Not heroic, not cinematic. Low-key in the right places. Decisive in the places that mattered. On the drive back, I passed the hardware store at closing. The kid with the keys flipped a sign and locked the door and tested it twice. He pulled it once more for luck, a superstition that is procedure, and then jogged through the drizzle to a car that started on the first turn. I watched his taillights blur to red threads and disappear. At home, I did not turn on any lamps. I stood in the doorway long enough to feel the house make room for me. Then I went to the workbench and took down the small bin of fittings and set it on the table because ritual keeps the hands honest. I took 3 wrenches out and laid them side by side, small to large, the way I taught apprentices to think. Then I put them back, one at a time, because thinking and doing are different, and knowing the difference is freedom. I brewed tea and didn't drink it. I rinsed the cup and left it to dry. I went to the window and watched wet write soft lines down the street and beads gather on the maple leaves until they were too heavy to hold and fell. Small, plain losses, the kind you can inventory and accept. The phone on the table, the smart one, still off, looked like a black stone someone had set there to test my patience. I left it. The flip was in my pocket, warm from body heat. If it rang, I would answer. If it didn't, I would sleep in the chair again, and tomorrow I would choose a different route. And the day after, I would sit in an office where paper makes weather and say yes to questions that sound like ritual, because ritual is how you make the hand remember what it did and what it will do again. I looked at my hands, not shaking, not ask permission. Ready. Drizzle on the glass made the city look like a drawing somebody had smudged with a thumb. I put my palm flat to the pane and felt the cold move into my skin, a clean transfer of what belongs where. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel anger. I felt the steadiness you get when the threads bite and hold, and you stop turning the wrench because the part is finally seated. That's the sound I took into the night, the quiet click of something fixed enough to keep you living.